Hello, my name is Carlos Torres, and I'm a cultural anthropologist specializing in media and communications. I'm writing a book on the story of human communication, and I'd like to invite you into the story as it unfolds. Every week, I will write a section of the book. It won't be polished, but that's the point. Give me your feedback and share with me the learning experience.
The Legacy of Biocommunication, Part 1.
Where does the story of human communication begin? This is a difficult question, but it may begin with the first life on Earth. Humans share many of the methods and even genes required for sound production with other animals. The human body is a biological universe of microcommunications carried on at the cellular level every microsecond of our existence. And these cellular signaling processes that go on unconsciously enable higher functioning and cognition in all living beings. And if our bodies are made from the atoms first created in stellar evolution, should the story of human communication go back as far as the beginning of the universe? Did communication play a role in making life complex from the simplest matter? In the late 19th century, European physicists were fascinated by the concept of entropy, or the inevitable decay of closed systems, like the universe, that begins from an ordered homogeneous system and evolves toward complete dissolution and disorder. In his 1944 book, What is Life?, physicist Erwin Schrödinger suggests that life creates new forms of organization in order to counter entropy, by eating, drinking, breathing, and in the case of plants, assimilating the raw ingredients of nature to produce complexity from simpler matter. Schrödinger suggested that a living organism maintain an astonishing gift of concentrating a stream of order on itself, and thus escaping the decay into atomic chaos, of drinking orderliness from a suitable environment. It was also Schrödinger's great intuitive idea to suggest that life forms must create some form of molecular database for the storage of its own reproductive data, and he theorized this database was housed in a periodic crystal. It was only a few years later that the DNA molecule was located deep within the cellular nucleus of animals and plants, a molecular structure composed of fairly simple molecules in a very complex arrangement of incredible ordering. It is the very essence of life-forming complexity from the simplest matter. The early Earth, hot, full of water and complex chemicals, provides the means for the long-term interaction of the ingredients for life over time. Eventually, very complex molecules encased in soapy shells produced naturally through polar electrical attraction find a refuge from turbulent seas and are able to use the heat and mineral resources of early Earth to reproduce themselves. There emerges an elemental communication created by the trial and error processes involved in the creation of a sustainable model of self-replicating life. It is a chemical-electrical interaction. The endosymbiotic theory in evolution holds that eukaryotic cells herald the dawn of symbiotic mutualistic life on planet Earth. And these larger cellular life forms are created in part by a process known as endosymbiosis, defined as any organism that is incorporated within the body or cells of another organism that often forms a mutualistic relationship. In this theory, simpler prokaryote cells, with a diverse means for extracting energy from the Earth's climate and conditions, merge into eukaryote cells many thousands of times their size. Eukaryote cells turn the endosymbiotic organic matter of early prokaryote cells into useful organelles like mitochondria, which help eukaryote cells create more efficient energy production. The Golgi apparatus that produces enzymes aiding a primitive form of digestion, and chloroplasts that transform the sunlight energy via photosynthesis. Endosymbiosis creates new eukaryotic organisms that are hardier, more efficient, and more opportunistic in a world rich in organic and mineral resources. Complex and adaptable, they are able to weather changing geomorphic conditions of Earth and geometrically expand their reproduction success and diversity with new and available oxygen for respiration and sunlight for photosynthesis. Eukaryote cells were the first of many mutualistic evolutions of life on Earth. The development of eukaryote cells are important to communication and to human communication on many levels. Firstly, part of the story of human communication is the ongoing systemic interior communication that keeps processes going on inside human beings without us even being aware of the incredible complexity that keeps us going, until perhaps something is disrupted in the complex systems that keep us functioning. We inherited the means for communicating within our own bodies from much simpler life forms, and the ingredients for the structure of life from the stellar molecules. What is significant about the early period of Earth and the dawn of life is that life forms begin by the organization of ever more complex molecular structures that somehow reach the level of self-replication after countless trillions of examples of assemblage and destruction. Communication, information conservation, and adaptation in life forms counters the chaos and disorder on the Earth and universe at large. Early cellular life builds a template for the sustainability of all life thereafter. All life will replicate information through a tried and true DNA fission process with mutations that alter favorable evolutionary pathways. Mutual aid through symbiosis will strengthen and alter species and become an important survival strategy facilitated by early forms of biocommunication. The field of biocommunication has really opened up in the last 50 years as scientists have been able to apply new technologies from electron microscopes to animal spy cameras to view how animals interact and communicate with their environment. In the book titled Biocommunication, editors Richard Gordon and Joseph Seckbach define the field of scientific inquiry that looks at exchanges of information between organisms within the kingdoms of life on Earth to include animals, plants, fungi, and cellular life. Biocommunication ranges in scales from bacteria to large mammals, and from biosocial systems ranging from molecular organisms to modern human networks. Communication in all organisms utilizes some form of sign or signaling process, from chemical signaling at the molecular level to subtle cues of body language in the great apes and humans. Body communication includes information exchanges between organisms of alike species, but also includes signaling processes between members of unrelated species. Well-functioning communication within species contributes directly to organism systemic health, and where one system of communication, like reproduction, works well, such systems are left in place in their direct simplicity. Poor communication in species, either within the biology of the individual cell networks or across living beings of their own kind, can result in death or unsustainability. As Gordon and Seckbach point out, when internal cellular communication breaks down, an organism can be subject to what we call disease, which can result from disturbed or damaged communication between cells. Biocommunication within species can be system-oriented, as with organ-to-brain communication. This is called intraspecific communication. Between members of the same species, biocommunication is defined as interspecific. Biocommunication between species also includes a tremendous variety of different forms of communication that would involve emotive vocalizations, for instance, between birds and mammals, pheromone chemical signals between plants and animals, or electrochemical signals within the biological body. Some of the gut or intuitive signals that human beings are unconsciously aware of are attributable to cellular signaling within an organism's biome. Documented methods for biocommunication now include gene expression, electrocommunication, infochemical cues, nucleotide flips, olfactory cues, protein synthesis, protosemiotics, quantum biology, signals induced by cell differentiation, and physical tactile knowledge exchange. For the most complex life forms, communication can include signs, verbal language, nonverbal language, knowledge-based communication, and acoustic vocalization. Animals rely upon subtle signaling and cues in nature. Up until 500 million years ago, life on Earth was cellular and confined to the water systems on our planet. Fungi developed around this time to take advantage of dead and decaying debris, breaking down chemical nutrients and using the basic molecular blocks of chemicals for energy. As algae and plant cells began to migrate from the ocean onto the shorelines of oceans and lakes, fungi also established footholds in these littoral waterside land spaces, and a symbiosis was created. Plants supplied fungi with sugars. Fungi supplied plants with minerals that helped plants create larger and more diverse forms. Eventually, the mycelium, or underground body of fungi, were to become established into the flora ecosystems and intertwine within the roots of plants. The natural symbiosis of plants and fungi would create whole forests, a wood-wide web of communication underground, and make possible the other life to prosper on a terrestrial Earth. The field of biocommunication has also greatly deepened our knowledge of communication and the sensory potential of seemingly simple organisms. Plants such as the bee orchid, for example, have evolved flowers that mimic female longhorn bees, but also emit an alamone or chemical substance to make double sure to attract pollinating bees. The flowers utilize both sexually deceptive pheromone attractors and floral mimicry to ensure pollination. Other plants communicate attraction to their pollinators through the use of bright colors or the use of attractive odors that can be both pleasant or repulsive to human beings. Many plants have the ability to ward away animals with toxic chemical production, and some, like the African acacia, are able to incrementally increase tannins within their leaves when predation reaches a limit to the tree's own survival. Other plants have evolved protective reactions to physical communication and display trembling, moving, and shaking of the whole plant over an insect visit. Carnivorous plants have adapted a host of deceptive ways of trapping insects, including slippery pitfalls, flypaper traps, snap traps, and even plants in the genus of evergreen called Roidula have created a mutualistic symbiosis with assassin bugs by creating resin-tipped glands that trap prey bugs. The plants benefit from the droppings of both prey bugs and the assassin bugs that prey upon them. Some research biologists now consider examples of adaptive behavior in flora like the African acacia as a form of plant intelligence. Insects, particularly those classified as social insects or eusocial insects like ants, termites, and wasps, have developed many different communication strategies for conveying mutual defense or orienting the others of their kind toward food caches. Workers of the Australian stingless bee, for instance, mark food resources with a pheromone helping their fellow worker bees to find the food. We also know that honeybees dance and walk in a very particular line to signal direction and distance. Male jumping spiders, for example, communicate mating readiness by tapping their legs to resemble buzzes or drum rolls to signal their intentions. One of only a series of elaborate steps they undertake to signal that they are a male of the same species and ready to procreate. Pollinating insects and flowering plants evolved together to use signal-mediated communication with diverse strategies and to ensure adaptive, mutualistic success. Birds are, quote, strongly social species. Communication among them is seen in a variety of ceremonies, gestures, and specific calls. Within the bird family known as Corvidae, which includes jays, crows, rooks, ravens, and nutcrackers, vocalization encompasses a broad range of meanings and may even impart shared learning. There is evidence that crows and ravens have worked cooperatively to learn to lift garbage can lids in an urban environment, for example, and to show each other how to use twigs as tools to hook grubs to eat. Crows and ravens have been also seen engaging in cooperative parenting, bird relatives helping to raise the young of related but also non-related adults. Ravens, like parrots, have the ability to imitate human speech and have evolved large brain-to-body weight ratios, common in social species. Birds, mostly males, universally engage in mating and courtship rituals to communicate readiness and fitness. Penguins use vocalizations to signal location and identify. Even young penguins can find their parents among thousands of other members in a surrounding flock by their sounds. There is good evidence to suggest that ancient relatives of birds, dinosaurs, vocalize extensively as well. Scientists are now using digital technologies to emulate the sounds of dinosaurs, such as the tubular-crested Parasaurolophus, which may have created sounds within their own head cavities resembling those made by a trombone. During the Cambrian explosion beginning 530 million years ago, larger multicellular life forms of incredible diversity developed in short order. Eyes and sense organs developed in multicellular organisms soon after the Cambrian explosion, suggesting increasing sensory awareness of ecosystems provided an important evolutionary advantage. While sensing vibrations is an ability acquired by many insects and even plants, the formation of ears and hearing began with reptilian creatures like dinosaurs and crocodilians that were most likely able to hear reasonably well. Snakes and turtles are sensitive to low-frequency vibrations and mostly hear and feel earthborne sound, rather than aerial sound waves. Modern-day crocodiles are able to emit a low range of growls and bellows, and birds, descendants of dinosaurs, emit and respond to a diverse range of sounds, of course. Looking at living fossils like the horseshoe crab, we have learned that ancient species were aware of the rhythms of nature. They determine what day of the year and moon cycle to congregate, most likely doing so for some 400 million years. Horseshoe crabs are driven to congregate by the need to reproduce, the most fundamental purpose for interspecies communication. The terrestrial mammals that survived the Cretaceous Paleogene extinction event some 66 million years ago multiplied, diversified, refined sensory organs like ears, tongue, noses, skin, and eyes to adapt to new ecological niches. Some mammals developed cognitive skills to enhance the perception afforded by sense organs. Wolves, for example, developed auditory learning defined as the ability to learn and memorize sounds, a relatively common trait in terrestrial vertebrates. Dogs are the exemplar non-human species of acquired auditory learning, and with some trained dogs able to learn the names and fetch dozens or even hundreds of objects at command. Dogs, however, cannot learn to vocalize sounds we teach them to understand and communicate vocally by whining, barking, and howling. There are, however, a few animal species that can learn to imitate and vocalize sounds that they have learned. This vocal learning is defined as the ability to modify acoustic sounds, but also to acquire new sounds via imitation and produce vocalizations. Bats, birds, songbirds, parrots, hummingbirds, whales, humans, seals, and sea lions, even elephants have the ability to imitate and issue sounds they have learned using a larynx in mammals and a syrinx in birds. Vocal learning has also been defined as cultural learning, in that each species must incorporate sounds into their own experience beyond instinctual responses. The degree of enculturation is debatable, but certainly within a few species, there was an evolution toward the ability to be able to communicate audibly, and it was important to group an individual's survival within their own ecological niche. The ability to communicate was encoded perhaps 200 million years ago into reptilian animals and into the ancestral line of mammals. When the human genome was finally mapped in the 1990s, one gene in particular, the FOXP2 gene, became identified with producing a key protein for proper speech and language development in human beings. The FOXP2 gene is also found in birds, mice, and bats, where it plays an important role in birdsong, vocalization, and echolocation sounds. The presence of this gene across animal classes in fish, reptiles such as alligators and mammals, indicates that it was important to sound making and that it was an early adaptation that could have been repurposed to help produce the complex vocalizations in some birds and mammals. The conservation of the FOXP2 gene in many animals demonstrates that vocal communication in some species became a necessary adapted trait for survival, especially social animals who depend on communication to thrive within their ecological niche. Along with senses that developed in terrestrial animals and the genes and structures that would code for communication, the brain of animals evolved to better process the signs and signals of the natural world that the senses divulged. About 250 million years ago, the brain of our reptilian-like forebears housed the hippocampus, amygdala, and parts of what were to be our limbic system, parts of the brain that coordinate and instigate emotional, sexual, and fighting behaviors. All human beings and mammals alike have these regions in the brain that trigger emotive responses, fight or flight, violence or fear, in addition to higher reasoning faculties. All mammals essentially are capable of the same underlying hormonal responses to environmental and social stimuli that human beings are. There are some key neurological differences between human brains and other animals. The human cerebrum, the main brain, accounts for 85% of the brain's total weight in humans. The wrinkled outer surface of the brain is called the cerebral cortex, and the newest part of the frontal portion of the cortex, evolutionarily speaking, is the neo or new cortex region. This part of the brain is 6 layers thick and is only present in mammals. It is especially prominent in human beings and is the location of higher functioning and cognitive ability. The human neocortex is the most advanced metaprocessor of sensory input in the animal kingdom. The size of the human brain compared to body weight is one of the largest ratios in the animal kingdom. We are a big brain species with more neural density in our cortex than any other animal. We also have better processing in brain imaging studies. For instance, comparing the brains of humans to other primates has shown that human beings have a greater number of fibers connecting brain regions involved in such human specialized functions as language, tool-making, reasoning, and social cognition. One theory as to why humans have more communicative and vocal learning capabilities in comparison to other mammals is that so much of our brain development occurs while being enculturated in the social world rather than in utero. The brain of a human infant is only 25% developed at birth, while that of a macaque monkey is about 60% developed at birth. Well, that's it for the first part of our biocommunication legacy. For part 2, coming up, I'll talk more about social animals and animal societies, a little bit about emotive expressions and animal development, and finally identity and self-awareness to conclude the chapter. And then we'll move on to chapter 2, A Bipedal Animal Arises, from my book. So I'll see you next time.